Hello, this is Morel Bernard with the continuation of the story, Booker T. Washington, the true life story of Booker T. Washington, an American. And we are now going to focus on a conference. Yes, there is held at the Tuskgee Institute every year a remarkable conference of Negro workers, mostly farmers who are to work out their salvation by the sweat of their brows in tilling the soil of the South. The purpose of these gatherings is severely practical, to encourage those who have not had the advantages of training and instruction, and to give them a chance to learn from the success of others as handicapped as they what are their own possibilities. As I have said many times, it is my conviction that the great body of the Negro population must live in the future as they have done in the past, by the cultivation of the soil, and the most hopeful service now to be done is to enable the race to follow agriculture with intelligence and diligence. I have just finished reading a little pamphlet, writing by Mr. George W. Carver, Director of the Agricultural Department at Tuskegee, giving the results of some of his experiments in raising sweet potatoes for 1 year. This colored man has shown in plain, simple language, based on scientific principles, how he has raised 266 bushels of sweet potatoes on a single acre of common land, and made a net profit of $121. The average yield of sweet potatoes to the acre in the part of the South where this experiment was tried is 37 bushels per acre. This colored man is now preparing to make this same land produce 500 bushels of potatoes. I have watched this experiment with a great deal of pleasure. The deep interest shown by the neighboring white farmers has been most gratifying. I do not believe that a single white farmer who visited the field to see the unusual yield ever thought of having any prejudice or feeling against this colored man, because his education had enabled him to make a marked success of raising sweet potatoes. There were, on the other hand, many evidences of respect for this colored man, and of gratitude for the information which he had furnished. If we had 100 such colored men in each county in the South, who could make their education felt in meeting the world's needs, there would be no race problem. But in order to get such men, those interested in the education of the Negro must begin to look facts and conditions in the face. Too great a gap has been left between the Negro's real condition and the position for which we have tried to fit him through the medium of our textbooks. We have overlooked in many cases the fact that long years of experience and discipline are necessary for any race before it can get the greatest amount of good out of the textbooks. Much that the Negro has studied presupposes conditions that do not, for him, exist. The weak point in the past has been that no attempt has been made to bridge the gap between the Negro's educated brain and his opportunity for supplying the wants of an awakened mind. There has been almost no thought of connecting the educated brain with the educated hand. It is almost a crime to take young men from the farm or from farming districts and educate them, as is too often done. In everything except agriculture, the one subject with which they should be most familiar. The result is that the young man, instead of being educated to love agriculture, is educated out of sympathy with it And instead of returning to his father's farm after leaving college to show him how to produce more with less labour, the young man is often tempted to go into the city or town to live by his wits. The purpose of the Tuskegee Negro Conference is to help the farmers who are too old or too bound down by their responsibilities to attend schools or institutes to do for them, in a way that Tuskegee and other agencies seek to do for the younger generation. Coloured men and women make long and expensive journeys to be present, coming from all the southern and several of the northern states. They have found that their money is not wasted, for they learn much by seeing what has been done at the school, from the advice of experts, but more especially by the exchange of opinions and by comparing experiences in their own field of work. These meetings are not for whining or complaints. Their keynote is hopeful courage, to look up and not down, forward and not backward, to be cheerful and mutually helpful is the golden rule of the conference. It was decided from the first to confine the proceedings to matters which the race had closely within its own control, and to positive, aggressive effort, rather than to mere negative criticism and recitations of wrongs. I wanted these coloured farmers and their wives to consult about the methods and means of securing homes, of freeing themselves from debt, of encouraging intelligent production, of paying their taxes, of cultivating habits of thrift, honesty, and virtue, of building school houses and securing education and high Christian character, of cementing the friendships between the races. In these conventions, as in other ways, we have tried to keep alive the feeling of hope and encouragement. We have seen darker days than these, and no race that is patient, long-suffering, industrious, economical, and virtuous, no race that is persistent in efforts that make for progress, no race that cultivates a spirit of goodwill toward all mankind, is left without reward. The Farmers' Conference each year adopts a declaration of principles which sum up its objects in such words as these: Our object shall be to promote the moral, material, and educational progress of this entire community, believing as we do that we are our own worst enemies. We pledge here and now, from this time forth, to use every effort to abolish and do away with the mortgage system just as rapidly as possible, to raise our food supplies such as corn, potatoes, syrup, peas, hogs, chickens, etc., at home rather than to go in debt for them at the store. To stop throwing away our time and money on Saturdays by standing around towns, drinking and disgracing ourselves in many other ways. To oppose at all times the excursion and camp meeting, and to try earnestly to secure better schools, better teachers, and better preachers. To try to buy homes, to urge upon all Negroes the necessity of owning homes and farms, and not only to own them, but to beautify and improve them. Since a greater number of us are engaged in agriculture, we urge the importance of stock and poultry raising, the teaching of agriculture in the country schools, the thorough cultivation of a small acreage rather than the poor cultivation of a large one, attention to farm work in winter, and getting rid of the habit of living in one-room houses. We urge more protection to life and property, better homes for tenants, and that home life in the country be made more attractive. All this with a view of keeping such great numbers of our people out of the large cities. In connection with the better homes and churches, we emphasize the need of careful attention to the morals of our ministers and teachers and all others acting in the capacity of leaders. Prosperity and peace are dependent upon friendly relations between the races, and to this end we urge a spirit of mainly forbearance and mutual interest. What these conferences are doing, and what sort of people are coming to them every year, may be garnered from some of their experiences as they have told them themselves during their visit to Tuskgee. Some of the best things are said by men and women who have succeeded in working their way up from abject poverty to comfortable independence. There is no better antidote for the foolish talk so often heard about the inevitable shiftlessness of the Negro race than these short and pitchy narratives of sacrifice, struggle, and achievement. A Florida man said that he had $6 when he married. He now owns 200 acres and a home of 7 rooms. I did without most everything until I got it paid for, he explained. He has 57 head of cattle, 6 work horses, and 5 colts, all raised by himself. Is it dangerous to give the ballot to that kind of a citizen? Will he be apt to use it to promote extravagant taxation? An Alabama farmer said, I own 67 acres of land. I got it by working hard and living close. I did not eat at any big tables. I often lived on bread and milk. I have 5 rooms to my house. I started with 1, and that was made of logs. I add a room every year. I was lucky in marrying a woman whose father gave her a cow. I ain't got no fine clock or organ. I did once own a buggy, but it was a shabby one, and now we ride in a wagon, or I go horseback on a horse. I raise that is worth $250. I have 7 children in school. I started ploughing with my pants rolled up and barefoot, said a Georgia man. I saved $500 and bought a home in Albany, Georgia. I bought 200 acres for $7 an acre and paid for it in 3 years. I made it pay for 200 acres more. After a while, I bought 1,300 acres. I live on it, and it is all paid for. I have 25 buildings, and they all came out of my pocketbook. That land is now worth $25 an acre. For a distance of 4 or 5 miles from my settlement, there has not been a man in the chain gang for years. I work 47 heads of mules. The only way we will ever be a race is by getting homes and living a virtuous life. I don't give mortgages. I take mortgages on black and white. I have put the first bale of cotton on the market in Georgia every year for 8 years. A widow from Alabama told her story, which shows, among other things, how a dog may be useful. There are 3 in my family, and I'm the boss. I save about $100 a year. I give no mortgages. I plant everything that a farmer can plant. I raise my own syrup, meat, peas, corn, and everything we need to eat. I have 3 cows. You have got to go low down to get up high. I traded a little puppy with my brother for a pig. From this 1 pig, I raised 8 pigs. And for 7 years I have not bought a pound of meat. I'm living on the strength of that little puppy yet. I own 40 acres and sometimes rent more land. A colored minister from Alabama said that he farmed as well as preached. He was a renter for 7 years. In 9 years he paid for 400 acres and now owns 1,015 acres. He raises horses, cows, mules, and hogs, and has 50 persons dependent upon him. He owns the land where he used to live as a renter, and lives in the house of the man from whom he rented. There are few white people in his neighborhood. Most of the colored people own their own homes, and they have lengthened the annual school term 2 months at their own expense. This man said that when he first bought land, he split rails to fence it during the day and carried them around at night. But his wife built the fence. A South Carolina man who was never before so far from home said that he was a slave for 20 years. I used to work 6 days for my master and Sunday for myself, he said. God introduced 10 commandments, but our people have added another. Thou shalt not work Saturdays or Sundays either. I stick to the 10 commandments and put in 6 days a week. And in that way, I bought 300 acres and paid for it. I have a large house for my own family of 10, and 14 other buildings on the place, 6 of them rented. No man is a farmer excepting the man who lives on the produce of his farm. A visitor from Louisiana told how he had borrowed $250 from his father and bought 25 acres of land in 1877. He used to begin work at 4 o'clock in the morning. For a year, his wife ground all their meal, 3 ears at a time, in a small hand mill. Now he owns 300 acres of sugar land, worth $100 an acre, and has 27 white and 48 colored people working for him. I would like to set a big table for you, said one of these farmers whom I visited at his home. But Professor, you all is teaching us to economize or save, and that's what I'm trying to do. When you remember how anxious the good farmers and their wives are always to set a good table for the visiting professors and reverends. This man had a good deal of courage in departing from old customs. I say to the farmers, if feeding the brethren is a strain on you, feed no more of them. Cut down on all expenses that can be trimmed without injury to yourself. One woman from Bullock County, Alabama, carried away the true spirit of the conference. Not long ago, one of our agents saw a deed to a valuable piece of land, farmland, brought with money she had saved by selling cows. She said that she had never thought of any such plan until she had visited the farmers' conference and heard others tell how they had bought land. An unusual feature of this case was that the woman did not live in the town in which she had invested her money. She had made herself interested enough to seek a chance to invest her earnings in the purchase of property several miles from her home settlement. She said that it required a mighty sight of willpower to keep from buying fine clothes with the money, but she was determined to get hold of some land, and she did it without any assistance from her husband. Yes, of course, I'll be at the next Negro conference, wrote another farmer. I want you to give me a chance to talk to. I want to show Mr. Washington a turnip I raised in my own garden and had been saving for the conference. And I want to tell him how much I have raised and eaten out of my own garden, and how much I have saved as a result of these teachings at the annual meetings. Another wrote recently, I had to buy very little to eat, for I raise with one horse all I want to eat, and a little more besides. Last year I raised 9 bales of cotton, plenty of corn, sugar cane, peas, and potatoes, and many other things. Besides this, my wife raised 20 hogs and a yard full of chickens, geese, and turkeys. The only way for the farmer to get out of debt and keep out of debt is to buy a home, raise what he eats, and pay at once for what he gets out of the store. A pilgrim from Georgia thus expressed himself. I came here to get my keg full of good news and glad tidings to carry back to Georgia, and I have got it. I began working for myself when I was 18 years old. My father and mother died when I was a child. I first worked for $8.50 a month and my board, and cleared $83 the first year. Then I worked on shares for a while. Then I bought a mule on credit, using my money to support myself while raising a crop. Now I own 1,500 acres of land, all paid for. I have 6 rooms in my house. I don't give any mortgages. I have 23 plows and a bank account. I haul on my drays about 10,000 bales of cotton every year for the planters in my county. I have another patch of 50 acres near Fort Gaines, on which there is a 6-room house. We come here to learn wisdom and knowledge, said a man from Macon County, Alabama. I had a part of the slavery time, and I've had all of the freedom time. When I was in my 18th year, I wanted to marry the worst way. I did it somehow. And then we tried every plan to get ahead in the world. I worked Sunday as well as Monday. I even hitched myself to the plow, and my wife plowed me. Now I have got horses, mules, corn, and plenty of everything to do me. But I have not got any home. Next year, when I come here, I'm going to own a place of my own instead of renting it. You were listening to Morel Bernard talking about the life of Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington and the work of the Tuskegee, Booker T. Washington, and American. And very interesting, given soon it will be Black History Month in USA. Why not join me? Join me for the next video. So join me, Morel Bernard, for the next video. I'll see you then. Take care for now.